Hi, AP Lang students. Today we are going to talk about that illustrious sophistication point. So I mentioned this on the RA notes video, but I wanted to go, sorry, I keep looking over here, my notes over here. I wanted to go more in depth since many of you are asking about it and want to put yourself in the best spot for a high score. So what does it take to get the sophistication point, and what should you be working on? What should you be focusing on? So whenever you're writing the essay, how do I want you to focus on sophistication? I don't at all. I don't want you thinking about this point at all. Instead, and again, this is redundant because I went over this, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again. I want you solely focused on evidence and commentary and writing a strong analysis. Let me just remind you, you cannot get the sophistication point unless you earn a 3 or a 4 in evidence and commentary. And remember, I've told you all year, the body paragraphs, that's the bulk of where your paper is graded, where your paper is scored after the thesis point. So I really want you focusing here. And again, this isn't College Board endorsed, but I think it's likely that writing a 6 essay is going to earn you a 5. Writing a 5 essay, going to earn you a 4. Writing a 4 essay, going to earn you a passing score with a 3. Again, not College Board endorsed, but I really don't know how else they would do that. So it's very important for you to get into this 3-4 range. And if you do that, then you put yourself in a spot where you can earn the sophistication point. So just a reminder, and I will tell you from grading a lot of your papers this entire year, and I believe Mrs. Elmore would agree with me, the biggest jump is that 2 to 3. A lot of papers stop right here in this category. They get the thesis point and then they stop here and get a 3. You might have noticed that yourselves. But I think that everybody, and I really mean this, every one of you is capable of getting at least that 3. And today we're going to talk about a little bit more on how you can build on that and possibly earn that sophistication point or lock yourself in. So we've already worked on thesis. We know what to do there. What's the difference between the 3 and the 2? So explains how at least one rhetorical choice contributes to the writer's message. Again, I've mentioned this before, that's rhetorical situation. The writer's message, what they're leaving off there is that the writer has a specific message to the audience. What is that message and how is the writer conveying that message to the audience? You have to do that at least one time. That's a little bit misleading, and let me explain why. Remember here in the 2, it says that makes one point well, but other points need more development. So I've graded a lot of papers fit into that. And sometimes it's for time constraints. So I want you to plan out ahead of time and know that you have to make more than one point well. And why is this important? Over here in the 3, it says to establish a line of reasoning with multiple supporting claims. The line of reasoning was a big thing that we talked about all year. And remember what we did in class, where we said, okay, you have one good point, that works really well. And now if you have this other point that's not very good, notice it doesn't make a line. You have another strong claim, it's a line of reasoning kind of producing this stronger idea. And that's what you're looking at. If your other paper is shaky or you just have one thing, it's a dot. It doesn't form that solid line of reasoning. And that's what you need to get a 3. So you need to find at least 2 really strong rhetorical choices that you can talk about that are contributing to the writer's message. Obviously, you need to do a lot more than that, but that's kind of the starter set. And if you're able to go in order and analyze an order of the text, looking for the tone shifts, I think that you're going to be able to do that. But that's what it takes to get over here in this 3. What does it take to get over here in the 4? The 4 is almost identical to the 3 except for one very important word, consistently. If you have explanations that are limited or unclear, you're going to fall into that 3 range. Consistently and clearly. There's never a moment in the paper where I think, oh, say more here. I want you to elaborate. What do you mean? I'm not asking those questions. Sometimes I might ask them in a 3, but it's still solid. A 4, consistently. Every single paragraph is working. And that's what you want to make sure that you're doing in order to get that forward evidence and commentary. Now, sophistication. Let's look at the exact criteria for that. Essays earning the sophistication point may exhibit the following characteristics. These 3 things boil down to this: a strong understanding of the rhetorical situation, strong reading skills, strong writing skills. Let's talk about those. An explanation of the significance and relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices given the rhetorical situation. Ideally, if you're doing this, explaining at least one rhetorical choice contributing to the writer's message, you should put yourself in a spot to earn this. This is a student that did not skim over the prompt. This is a student that knows audience, speaker, subject, knows what exigence is, has thought about it, knows what the writer's purpose is, and remember, that'll be in stable wording, but has tied it all together and doesn't forget it. Make sure that that's important. A student who never addresses the audience doesn't get this point. A student who says something like, well, this is a metaphor and it's used here. Why? Why is it used there? And what is that doing for the audience? Those are empty. Without the rhetorical situation, it's going to be nearly impossible to get that sophistication point. The second bullet point there is an understanding of the passage's complexities and tensions. This one is probably the hardest to gain, I guess. Think of it this way. It's a reader. This is where those strong reading skills come in. Someone who's able to go beyond the obvious. So the idea here is when you're looking for complexity, one great way to do this is notice where a writer may be putting in a counter argument. What points are they conceding on, and how are they refuting that? Tensions. What else are they trying to say? That's going beyond the obvious. I gave the example the other day with Gandhi. Students who understood this really have a knowledge more about the world than what's on the paper. Students with that Gandhi prompt, a lot of people just said, well, he's trying to rescind the SALT Act. He's trying to rescind the SALT Act. And yes, that's true, but what else? He's seeking independence. And this is a starter for that. With Albright, and I'm going to point it out a little bit later, the stable wording tells you that her message is of perseverance. So a person who just keeps saying perseverance doesn't really get the complexity and tension. She's seeking gender equality there. She's pushing for these women to fight for gender equality. And someone who's able to go beyond that sees the complexity, sees the tension. The third one is your prose style. Consistently vivid, clear, and persuasive. A lot of students read that and say, well, that's making sure that my grammar is good. And yes, I mean, this is an English paper. Your grammar needs to be on point. But that's not really what this means. You will notice in the 9, or the old 9, which is now a 6, the one that I'm going to read later has a ton of grammatical errors, but they're not distracting ones. They're ones that, you know, the kid needs to know where the comma goes, where the semicolon goes, but they know what they're doing and they know what they're writing, and we're going to forgive that in a 45-minute timed writing. But your paper needs to be consistently vivid, clear, and persuasive. Our Wednesday lesson was on quote integration, and Mrs. Elmore talked to you in detail about quote integration, and the goal there is important because the idea with quote integration is that your paper, not only you're saying something about the quote, and it's not just dropped in. When you just drop a quote in and you don't fully integrate it into your sentence, it's not clear. So it's really hard to read what you're trying to say. So it's important from a mechanical sense as well as content That's your commentary and tying it together and what you're trying to do. So consistently vivid, clear, and persuasive. And there's that word consistently again. I remember when I went to the Summer Institute and a teacher brought up, or a grader, I guess, talked about the fact that this can't just be one paragraph, one random paragraph where they use some good vocabulary words. While we like the vocabulary there, this is all the way from beginning to end, someone who's exhibiting some writing style. Some students feel like, I don't really know what you mean. Can you give me something to work on with style? And so I wanted to work with you a little bit on that. I'm going to pull up 2 documents, and these documents are attached to your assignment. The first one is called The Death of Ethos, Pathos, and Logos. And you might remember at the beginning of the year, I told you the weakest writers cling to ethos, pathos, and logos. Cling to the appeals, never let them go. That's not really what you want to do with rhetorical analysis. Yes, certainly a writer is appealing to emotion, but what exactly are you saying with it, and are you relating it to the audience? It's worth your time to peruse this document. I'm not going to go through it all the way with you, but there's some really great stems on here. Now, keep in mind they have to work for the prompt, but I want to show you some examples. I really want to say it uses ethos, but then I realize this doesn't make any sense. So instead I write, the author notes his or her experience in this area by, the author endears herself to her audience by, the author demonstrates that he or she is a model of morality by. Much better than saying he uses ethos, which we don't even know what that means, and that's not necessarily grammatically correct. I really want to say appeals to pathos, but instead I can be more clear by saying the author causes the audience to feel X by, the author reminds the audience of blank experiences by, the author inspires a sense of. These work a lot better. I really want to say logos, but instead I can be more specific by saying the author demonstrates the sensical nature of X by offering data which serves to, the author notes the various benefits and advantages of X by, the author notes the various disadvantages. You see how this works? You can look at this in more detail, but I really like the stems, and more than just getting you away from the appeals, that helps strengthen your commentary and likely helps you tie the rhetorical choices to the audience, which is key. Next thing I want to show you is sentence variety and talk to you a little bit about that. There's a reason in English class we teach sentence types. And it's not because we want you at 35 to be able to say, oh, that's a complex sentence. That's definitely one. No one is doing that. No one cares. But when you write, varying your sentence length is important because it shows your skills as a writer. And when you're a reader, you notice that. You notice talented writers because they do this. Follow along with me and read this. This makes sense. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length, and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I am certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this is important. So write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ear. Don't just write words, write music. Vary your sentence structure. These are ways to help you with writing. Now going back to the rubric, maybe. You may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed and thinking, listen, lady, I cannot do all 3 of these things. No one's asking you to. And remember, I told you your focus needs to be here with your analysis. This will come if you're doing this well. It usually does. But notice the wording here. Essays earning the sophistication point may exhibit. This is not a checklist. You do not have to get all 3. It doesn't even say you have to get 2 out of the 3. But I will tell you from reading a lot of these papers, most papers that are sophisticated nail them all. They're kids who can write, kids who can read, and they're kids who get the rhetorical situation. But don't be alarmed, may exhibit. And remember, you're not focusing on that. You're just gonna write a strong analysis and you're gonna let that be natural and you're gonna practice your writing so that you get better. Continuing on, all right? Now, let's look at paper that's sophisticated. We're gonna continue on with Albright, so you should be familiar with the prompt, so I'm not going to look at that. I'm simply gonna read sample H. So follow along with me here. I'm gonna move my screen over. This was the 9. So this 2018 set was scored on the old scale, so it was a fantastic essay at a 9. And now this was rescored as a 6, of course. We have come a long way since women gained voting rights. Yet we have not gone far enough as gender equality remains an issue unresolved. The glass ceiling remains unbroken, and women continue to fight on all fronts for rights they deserve, rights that should be inherent. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, in her speech to the women graduating from Mount Holyoke College, emphasizes the need to continue to struggle and strive for gender equality. By contrasting hypotheticals and reality, providing examples and personal anecdotes, and strong repetition of the word persevere, Albright successfully conveys her message to these graduates that they must continue to fight for rights in the face of opposition and that they will succeed. Notice the good, strong thesis statement. Mentions rhetorical choices, goes a bit beyond just perseverance. Albright begins by presenting her audience with America's accomplishments and continued work in this growing world. She states the past. The Berlin Wall is now a memory, then a hypothetical. We could be satisfied with that. And then America's continued work, creating a future and building world peace. This powerful form of presenting what has been accomplished, then a hypothetical paired with reality, is a powerful way to allude to the idea that accomplishing is not enough. You must never stop trying to get better. Without the hypothetical, her statements engender awe and pride in her audience for the progress of America once. Albright wants her audience to understand that this continued effort is optional. We could be enjoying our technological advancements while ignoring the world. By adding the hypothetical, she forces her audience to acknowledge that America is going above and beyond something hard to do, but accomplishable. Albright does not do this once. She does it 5 times. The Berlin Wall, nuclear weapons, Bosnia, a world economy, and last but not least, women's rights. She includes women's rights last to reveal that this urge to push onwards is not confined to America, but to also her audience, a class of women with the potential to bring about change. With this series of contrasts between hypothetical and reality, the audience, a class of women, cannot help but nod their heads in understanding that this could be them, spearheading the continued struggle for gender equality in a relentless manner. Perfect audience analysis there. Excellent commentary linking to the audience. Albright, having gotten the gears in the minds of the audience turning on what they maybe can do regarding women's rights, follows up with a series of personal anecdotes of what women across the world are doing. Fantastic transition, topic sentence. Women in Sarajevo that she personally met are reaching across ethnic lines. Women in Burundi reach out to prevent another Rwandan genocide. Women in Guatemala, Burma. One might think that these examples serve a minor effect, but in fact, these anecdotes are very powerful. Being the Secretary of State, Albright is an imposing figure in the eyes of her audience, and they know her anecdotes are stories of unforgettable encounters and experiences of a strong woman. The personal feel brought by Albright sends a message to her audience that this is real. A movement is happening. Women are stepping across the globe. Even better, Albright selected nations going through conflict and devastation, and women rising from the shattered remnants from society is a story that brings her audience to tears. Tears of joy and pride, knowing that fellow women were standing up to injustices everywhere. More importantly, the hidden feeling conjuring up in the minds of the audience is, they can do it, we can do it too. These anecdotes are like the stories of the underage, the poor and oppressed rising to make a difference. Anecdotes that strike home within the hearts of women sitting and listening to Albright's speech. Complexity and tension, right there, okay? I read several papers with this prompt where students said, oh, she's appealing to emotion. She's bringing in lots of different examples. Yeah, but for what reason? What is she trying to do? Where's that? If they can do it, we can do it too. She's showing that. They get that. They understand that Albright has this specific experience because she is a woman who has done that as Secretary of State. Having brought forth the continued struggle for women's rights and enlightening her audience with their potential by showing them the acts of others like them, Albright begins her final push for action. She knows that these graduates in their struggle for equality will face resistance, ridicule, distraction. Some will concede, others will struggle onwards with diminished fervor. Overcoming these roadblocks are tough, but Albright pushes onward and drills into the minds of these future activists that they must persevere. Ending each paragraph with, and persevere. After speaking of all the opposition and taunts that they may face, Albright successfully relates the idea of perseverance with opposition in the minds of the graduates. Walking away from college, they will remember to persevere in the face of opposition. The perseverance is the key to continued struggle. This link is solidified through Albright's repetition, and there will be little opposition these graduates will not be able to overcome in the future. In addition, she states, if you aim high enough, before every description of opposition, as if she is challenging her audience to aim higher. This repetition of a challenge is something that graduates cannot walk away from, as every time she repeats, if you aim higher, her audience looks inwards and questions themselves as to whether or not they will push harder and aim higher. And of course, after hearing America's continued work and the struggle of women abroad, the graduates say to themselves, yes. It is this yes that Albright wants, a yes that confirms to each audience member that they will fight for gender equality, a yes that symbolized the beginning of an endless journey to achievements in the face of opposition. Albright's commencement speech successfully drives home the will to fight for gender equality among her audience by showing them that they can always push harder, that others are already in the fray, and that the path is hard and is a challenge that you may partake in. And partake they will as they walk away from the ceremony, ready to challenge societal ideas and fight for gender equality among all walks of life. Okay, so is that paper sophisticated? Bet it is. Now, are there some punctuation problems? Yes. Are there some misspellings? Yes. Do I care? No. This kid had 45 minutes. So, and what you're going to have. So we're going to forgive that they don't have every grammatical rule memorized. They should, but they don't, and we're going to move on with our life. Does it fit the other criteria? Yes. We already talked about rhetorical situation. We already talked about complexity. What about prose style? Notice how I mentioned that transition. Notice how you were able to just kind of follow along. It's fluid, it's making sense. And the writer is doing things, they're making moves as a writer, showing what Albright did. So that's sophistication. Now for your assignment. I'm gonna have you read the paper that it was an 8 on the original scale and is now a 6. And then I'm gonna have you answer really 4 questions, one with 3 parts, and then a second follow-up question that asks about your takeaway from this. And this is due by Monday at 8 a.m. along with your quote integration stuff if you haven't already taken care of that. Now, we have been more lax given e-learning. It's just a whole different situation. We've been more lax with due dates, but I highly suggest you get that in by Monday at 8 a.m. And I wouldn't recommend working late at night to do that. Get it done over the weekend. Next week starts our abbreviated version of Killer April. What you're going to do is on Monday, you're going to write a rhetorical analysis, which is excellent practice for you considering that's what you're going to have to do on the actual exam. On Wednesday, you're going to be doing an anchor paper analysis. I think it's important still for you to do some comparing and looking at the anchor papers in detail. And then on Friday, you're going to do a self-evaluation. Where do you fall in comparison to the papers you've already looked at? Now that's different than just kind of letting your work pile up. You got to do the essay on Monday. And then we'll give you a little bit of leeway with the anchor paper analysis and the self-eval, but you're going to want to stay on top of everything so that you don't get behind. As always, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to contact me. Have a great day.